but I didn't really expect it to be as profound as it actually was. And it is a quite surprisingly profound film. And if you look at the original Godzilla, it's dealing with ideas, and a lot of it is about kind of the idea of nuclear experimentation or scientific experimentation. Should you use it? Shouldn't you use it? Things that are potentially have dangerous uses. And of course, Godzilla is awoken in both films very explicitly in the original film and implicitly in this film, I would say, by nuclear testing in the Pacific. But that film, it deals with that in a more kind of the original film deals with it in a more kind of a broad way. And also, the characters in the film are maybe a little more, government people, scientists, whereas in this film, it gets a lot more personal and a lot more common man-like, because the main character is just an ordinary kamikaze pilot who chickened out, so to speak, in doing his duty. And before his mission, he pretended that his plane was mechanically faulty and needed to be repaired. So he got out of doing a suicide bombing, and he's suffering guilt from this throughout the movie, as well as the trauma of the war and the deaths of all these people that he cared about, whether it's his fellow soldiers or the mechanics or his family being killed. And he has this survivor's guilt, which is amplified by his own, what he feels as cowardice. But at the very beginning of the film, we're told right away that another soldier sympathizes with him, because he says, what's the point of throwing your life away when it's not going to make a difference? Meaning, they've already pretty much lost the war by this point. So what is the point of dying just for the sake of dying? And that's sort of a question that recurs throughout the movie and choices that this character has to make. And yet the cultural expectation that the best thing he could do is die for his country, even if it's pointless, is so deep that he's just really saddled with this horrible guilt throughout the film. And so when we talk about what, a culture of life might look like in this, a culture of death might look like in our country, it's different in some ways, I think, than what a culture of death might look like in, pre-World War II Japan, or in, ancient Sparta or something, where we don't have so much a culture of death that focuses on self-sacrifice, right? And in those countries, those highly nationalistic, collectivistic cultures, they did have that notion, but it's twisted and it becomes kind of a death cult, because it's all about war. And what amazes me about this movie, especially because, not just knowing about, Japan pre-World War II, pre-modernized Japan, but also just knowing about Japan now with its high rates of, depression and suicide and stuff, it is remarkable to have a film that sort of gave me some hope for the Japanese people, actually, that they could come up with something this beautiful and profound, and that deals with these themes not just in a broad way, but in a way that's like very specific to their own history and their own pathologies, and deals with it in such an honest and maybe even uncomfortable way.
It's continuing this legacy in more ways than one. We talked about the artistic sort of legacy and continuity, but there's also this thematic deepening that's taking place. And it was so profound, because in addition to being, very pro-life, it's also pro-family. It sort of posits as like this thing worth fighting for, the love that this man has for the woman who will become his wife, and this child that they've both effectively adopted, right. And the beauty of that family unit, and his inability to accept that from the beginning of the film. Right. It's a process that he has to go through in dealing with his own demons, his own dragons.
Yeah.
before he can give his full-throated yes to that.
But what's cool is that like any number of films we could point to are like, yeah, he's fighting for his family, so that's pro-life. But it would be very broad. And this film, again, like what you just pointed to, the dynamics are so specific to the characters. They're specific to the culture. There's specific problems. It's not this simplistic issue. Yes, he would defend them, but it's not that he has to decide to defend them so much as he has to decide to be vulnerable to them.
Yes.
Like he would be on board with defending them from the beginning. We see him working and providing for them, but it's not only the external role, but it's also the internal family dynamic that is being looked at, and the challenges and the conquering of those problems as well.
Right. And having to let go of his shame that's coming from without in order to be available to his family,
Yeah, and like James, like I was crying too at the end of it. I don't know, there's just something about all of it together, kind of like once you see these different like characters kind of over time, there's like this deeper conversion that each character has. It's like this whole cast of characters that are like forming this little patched together orphaned community of sorts, and all of them have their own like baggage and like weird stuff, and then all of them end up like ascending this like ladder of virtue or something, and then like there's that kind of final beautiful like heroic virtue courage moment that happens at the end that's like so life affirming and beautiful and like countercultural for what this like former kind of vision of like suicide being the higher form of like, if you've been dishonored, this is just what you do. Like there's no mercy,
right.
No forgiveness. And so for me, like all of those things like hit me at once right at the end, and it just was so I think like this is a really needed movie right now actually, because it is like it's so deeply enmeshed in the culture. Like I think this is a movie that people generally are like, oh, Godzilla, cool, like yeah, nostalgia factor, like action factor, whatever, it's a cool Japanese movie with actual Japanese actors and the director, whatever, like there's all these cool qualities about it, and artistically it's beautiful, but it's kind of like a secret agent movie where like there are these really deep, beautiful themes related to virtue and the culture of life, and like how community kind of brings about that like deeper transformation of heart that brings about love and sacrifice.